Hi, everyone. Welcome to Flock Talk. I'm Erin Morgan.
And I'm Jordan Sloggett.
And we work for the farmer members of the Ontario Sheep Farmers Organization.
This week, we are discussing Selenium Supplementation with Nicole Moran and Dr. Niel Karrow from the University of Guelph. All right. Thank you, Nicole Moran and Dr. Niel Karrow, for joining us on today's episode. Would you like to introduce yourselves to our audience?
I'll go first. My name is Nicole Moran. I am a PhD student at the University of Guelph. I also did my master's at the University of Guelph, and I did my undergrad at the University of Guelph. So I am a lifetime Griffin, I guess, but hoping to finish up my PhD in the next year or so.
I'm Niel Karrow, and I'm a professor in the Department of Animal Biosciences at the University of Guelph. Been here since 2002, and during that time, we've carried out research in sheep up until present.
Fantastic. So welcome to the Flock Talk podcast. Can you briefly describe the focus of your PhD research and what led you to investigate selenium supplementation in sheep, Nicole?
Yeah. So one thing that is a huge impact on the sheep industry is pre-weaning mortalities and lambing mortalities. So globally, we've seen numbers up to 20 to 40% mortality rates. And statistically speaking, anything over 10% is considered detrimental to profits. So what we're looking for is a why. Why do we see this? So one thing we actually see globally, but specifically here in Ontario, is we see low selenium levels in soil. And selenium is such an important part of sheep health in so many different aspects. Antioxidant properties are a huge one. So the focus of my research is to investigate the differences between organic selenium supplementation and inorganic selenium supplementation in late gestation ewes, and the effect on not only the ewe's immune capabilities, but also the immune capabilities of their lambs and the development of their lambs. So we also know that selenium is typically supplemented in an organic fashion in industry. In fact, OMAFRA mandates say that lambs should receive an intramuscular dose of inorganic selenium within the first 24 hours of birth. And so we're looking at how adequate maternal selenium supplementation, in particular maternal supplementation with organic selenium, not only reduces the need for these injections, but also produces healthier lambs.
Super interesting.
Yeah. And so you sort of just explained this, but are there any other specific effects of selenium supplementation on lamb resilience that you're exploring? And maybe you can speak to, like, overall why this is a significant area for sheep health and management for people to consider?
So we look at a few things in the lambs. So the big thing that we do is we weigh them biweekly until from postpartum day 0 to postpartum day 100. We also take blood collection. We do that throughout day 0 to postpartum day 50. And we look at selenium levels. We look at health biomarkers in the blood. We also look at innate and acquired immunity through 2 different challenges. So for innate immunity, we do a bacterial toxin challenge, and we see how the lambs fare based on their selenium supplementation from their mother. And we also do an acquired immunity challenge. So they receive a novel antigen in 2 different doses, kind of like a vaccine. And then we do a skin test to see how their acquired immunity responds to that and how they do based on maternal selenium supplementation. And that 0 to 50 postpartum days, that's a really key part of pre-weaning mortality. Those are the days we look at to see if lambs will make it past the pre-weaning point, the post-weaning point.
Interesting. So how does selenium interact with other nutrients or environmental factors in affecting lamb development and immune response?
So selenium interacts with several other vitamins and minerals. The most well-known interaction is selenium and vitamin E. So these are both antioxidants, and vitamin E and selenium work in tandem to perform their antioxidant function. And the literature on these interactions in sheep is very extensive, with several studies showing a positive correlation between selenium supplementation, vitamin E increases, and improved immune performance. But we also see selenium interactions with zinc, arsenic, cadmium, iron, and copper. So the literature shows that selenium reduces incidences of iron toxicity, cadmium toxicity, and arsenic toxicity. And we also see that selenium and zinc act as cofactors in the production and activation of digestive enzymes, and that results in improved nutrient absorption, improved feed utilization, and ultimately enhanced growth performance. And the most interesting one is copper and selenium. It hasn't been fully defined yet by current literature, but some literature suggests that selenium increases the storage of copper in the liver, which ultimately leads to a decreased risk of toxicity, which would be really vital if we can delve into that more overall, because copper is such a hugely important mineral to sheep.
Can I add something to that? That was great, Nicole. I'll give you a little bit of history too. So we've done some work in the past with selenium. In China, I was involved in a study where they were using pigs as a model. And the control group is always a selenium deficient group. So that's a little challenging to get selenium deficient food. Nicole can touch on that if she wants to. But what we found was that we also found enhanced passive transfer of antibodies from mother to piglet in that study. And we didn't get a chance to explore why that is. So Nicole was talking about all the knowns, but there's a lot of unknowns too. And if you look in the literature, you see that across species that passive immunity is improved when sheep are getting, or cattle or pigs are getting sufficient amounts of selenium. But we're not exactly sure why that is. So in this study, that's one of the things that we want to explore, looking at colostrum quality. And are there more antibodies in the colostrum that are coming from the mother? Or is there somehow enhanced uptake of antibody across the lamb's gut barrier wall, which is only permeable for 24 to 48 hours? So we're very much focusing on colostrum components in these sheep as well, to find out whether deficiency contributes to changes in colostrum proteins, specifically focusing on immunological related proteins, but also the microbiota of the colostrum as well, which is important because that's how the newborn lamb colonizes its own gut. That's all coming from the mother.
Based on the findings of the research so far, do you have any expectations about how selenium supplementation guidelines for sheep farmers could possibly change?
So yeah, current guidelines indicate lambs should be injected with inorganic selenium immediately following birth or as close to as possible. And our research so far has demonstrated that selenium injections are not needed for lambs whose ewes receive adequate selenium supplementation. Also, current guidelines restrict selenium supplementation to a maximum of 0.3 milligrams per head per day. And we have included a treatment group that receives 0.6 milligrams of organic selenium per head per day. And we found that lambs whose ewes receive that level of selenium have the highest level of selenium in their muscle tissues at 10 days postpartum, with no negative side effects to ewes or lambs.
So do you know why that original threshold would have been originally placed? What are some of the issues that could come with an excessive selenium, like maybe above and beyond that? It was 6.6?
It was 0.6 milligrams.
Okay. But yeah, maybe you could speak to what are the downsides of an excessive amount of selenium?
Yeah. So the biggest problem with selenium toxicity is it affects muscle tissues. So you'll see decreased muscle quality. You'll see sheep that aren't able to move as well. It's very similar to a deficiency of selenium in that movement is really hindered and the muscle quality really goes down. But the literature also states that selenium toxicity happens with a huge dose of selenium in one sitting. That really hikes the selenium toxicity. It's not really seen with chronic, slightly increased levels of selenium supplementation.
You can also maybe touch on the different forms of selenium and how toxicity is impacted that way too, Nicole.
Yeah, so we have organic forms and inorganic forms of selenium. So when we talk about organic selenium, That's selenomethionine and selenocysteine and selenocysteine. So these are seleno amino acid residues. And these are much more costly to supplement. However, they are much more bioavailable, and there's a decreased risk of toxicity because they aren't stored as readily. They are utilized, and then any excess is excreted. With inorganic selenium types, we see selenate, selenite, and selenide. So the most common you'll see is sodium selenate. That's what your typical injection would be for lambs. And while it is cheaper to utilize, there is an increased risk of toxicity because there is increased storage and it's not as broken down as readily by rumen microbes.
That's interesting. So we all know that, as you mentioned earlier, Niel, when you start a project to look at one thing, other questions and other opportunities come from that. So as you've been doing this project, have you learned other things that may lead to future research?
We really were quite shocked that the lambs didn't need selenium injections because that's just so ingrained in practice. And we received some initial pushback on not giving the lambs selenium injections, but we monitor our lambs for morbidities and mortalities, and we have seen nothing related to selenium deficiency or anything like that. So that was really interesting. And one challenge we faced when supplementing selenium is we wanted to have a very exact dose per ewe per day. And the selenium comes in a powder form. And we can't simply put it on top of grain because they reach over, they eat each other's grain. The powder flies off, obviously. So we had to find a way to give it to them that they would enjoy, but also would be an exact dose. So we couldn't use molasses because molasses has its own selenium. So we ended up having to use simple syrup, which is just sugar and water boiled together in a 1-to-1 ratio. And then we went through some mathematics to determine how much selenium needs to be included in how much simple syrup to make it so that it's a selenium simple syrup mixture that has 0.3 milligrams per 5 mils of sugar. And then we had to figure out if the sheep even liked the sugar water, which they absolutely do.
Yeah, we've made them sugar addicts, actually. So part of that challenge was because the work that we're conducting is out at the Ponsonby Sheep Research Facility. And in a commercial setting, it'd be a lot easier to mix up a large batch of feed and mix the selenium in there really well. In our case, with such a small batch of feed that we were mixing up for this study, we found it was more applicable to actually give them an oral injection, which is fine for us in research setting because we know exactly what their dose is then. But yeah, they're all sugar addicts now.
So looking ahead, how do you see your research influencing sheep breeding and management practices in the future?
I think that our research will turn sheep producers towards using organic selenium over inorganic selenium. It may be more expensive, but if it reduces the need for unnecessary injections, keeps youth healthier during their last month of pregnancy, and produces healthier, hardier lambs, it seems like a worthwhile investment.
Yes, I would agree. Another comment would be make sure if you've got your own hay that you're bringing off the field, make sure that you do measure those selenium levels. There's a few publications where they've actually done that, but they're quite outdated. But there are certain regions of Ontario, for example, where selenium levels are low, and it would be good to know what your feed is before you're feeding the sheep.
So at the beginning, you talked about the high mortality rates of lambs and how, you hoped that selenium would improve that mortality rate. What have you seen as a result of this study? I know it's sort of early days, but have you seen a reduction in lamb mortality as a result of the increased selenium?
So that is a hard answer to give because at Ponsonby, it is a pathogen restricted herd. So they don't see a lot of mortalities in their lambing and pre-weaning mortalities anyways.
Okay.
But we did not see any selenium-related morbidities, no selenium-related mortalities. Our trial lamb mortalities were very well within the range of normal for Ponsonby.
Which is around 5%. Is that right? Maybe even a little lower than that.
Okay.
It's between 2.5 and 5%. They do not see very many lambing mortality.
It was very interesting. Like Nicole mentioned that there was some pushback about not giving the lambs their selenium injection. The pushback would have been that we're going to start getting all these lambs that have white muscle disease. As Nicole mentioned, we haven't seen any of that occurring, even in our control group that was getting low levels, like very low levels of selenium in their hay. Now, this study that we're doing is in the last trimester, so we haven't been feeding them through the whole gestation phase. But it was interesting to us that we didn't see any incidence of white muscle disease, even in that negative control group.
So what happens next? Do you try this trial on a commercial flock? Do you introduce these feeding methods to a sheep flock that isn't in the Ponsonby Research Station to see whether there are impacts on mortality?
It would be hard to do it on a commercial farm just because it's not as controlled as Ponsonby. Like, one of the benefits of doing it at Ponsonby is we can put them in individual pens. We can weigh out their hay and know exactly how much hay they're getting per day. We know exactly how much grain they're getting. And when we do lambing, we collect blood from the ewe, blood from the lamb, lamb weights, and colostrum, which with 25 ewes is very doable. But in a commercial setting, we might see larger numbers, and that might get a little more tricky. I think a really interesting route we could be taking with this is to look at selenium and other mineral interactions. So doing a selenium copper study out of Ponsonby. Magnesium is coming up as a really interesting mineral to look at, and nutrient. So any micronutrient interaction studies, I think, would be really interesting to capitalize on and look into. What combination of micronutrients can we combine to produce healthier, hardier lambs?
Now, I'll just add to that. Yeah, I think it does make sense to look in a clinical setting. Whether we would be the group to do that, I'm not so sure. But that would be the next phase of this study will help to get approval for this product in Canada, and then yes, another group could certainly test it in a more clinical setting. Sorry, in a more commercial setting.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the path to getting recommendations onto an actual sheep farm about how much selenium to put into the ewe ration in order to reduce lamb mortality. So what is that path?
Go ahead, Nicole. Any thoughts?
Okay. So getting publications out is really important. Going to conferences and speaking about it, networking with industry professionals and having those conversations is really important. I recently went to the OSF conference in October and had a lot of really good conversations with not only industry individuals in government, but also producers who were really interested in what I was doing and really interested in seeing how that could change sheep farming in Ontario.
To add to that, I would say reaching out to OMAFRA, for example. They have publications where and extension events where we could participate in, so have direct contact with producers. And our plan is to put out an article into Ontario Sheep Farmers magazine, hopefully soon.
Right.
And so, those are all little steps that need to be carried out to we pass on that knowledge.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to when your research is all complete and we can put in some an article in our magazine and maybe highlight your research again, either on the podcast or in our other communications vehicles. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Nicole and Niel for joining us today.
And thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Join us next Wednesday with our marketing-themed interview with Jim Young from Purebred Sheep Breeders of Ontario.
Aaron, what's new and exciting with Ontario Sheep Farmers?
Your Ontario Sheep Farmers Board of Directors has been meeting over the wintertime, and one of the key priorities that they had in their meetings this winter have been to set the priorities for the organization for 2024. The board set 2 key priorities for our organization for 2024, and they are return on investment and increased producer engagement. The first return on investment priority means a return on investment from our marketing activities as an organization, our research and our member engagement, and the goal is for all projects to produce a measurable return on investment to producers for their OSF license fee dollars. When it comes to producer engagement, this means supporting our producers so your businesses are healthy and you can be active in the Ontario sheep farmers and find meaningful ways for you to engage with other sheep farmers in your region and across the province. As a reminder, we are stronger and more effective as an organization with your participation and your input, so we really encourage you to attend your district committees meetings and to reach out to the board if you have issues or concerns or opportunities that you would like us to discuss. That's really important to our organization, and we look forward to hearing from you. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe through our podcast app to receive alerts for our future episodes, and please share our podcast with your friends.
For more Ontario Sheep Farmers content, follow us on social media at Ontario Sheep Farmers on Instagram and Facebook, and at Ontario Sheep on X. And visit our website at ontariosheep.org.